So available from Sky River Films.
Myth. Legend. Science. Aurora. Aurora, rivers of light in the sky. Aurora from Sky River Films.
Wild Alaska is a magnificent visual portrait of wildlife on the last frontier. Shot in some of the most remote regions of Alaska, this program takes you in close, into areas rarely known or visited. Award-winning cinematography, breathtaking in scope and beauty, captures the grand scale of Alaska's wilderness and the animal life within it. Wild Alaska from Sky River Films. Finally, a video that captures all the excitement and adventure of engaging Alaska's best fighting game fish. Fishing Alaska is an unforgettable hour-long journey to some of the world's best fishing holes. Battle the enormous king salmon and the mighty halibut. Thrill to the excitement of tournament-winning Dolly Varden and rainbow trout. Share the fun and exhilaration of Alaska's remote fly-in-only rivers. Catch Fishing Alaska from Sky River Films. Traveling the Inside Passage takes you on an unforgettable journey along Alaska's southeast panhandle. From the majestic forests to the ancient glacial ice fields, this is a place filled with beauty, wildlife, and excitement. Traveling the Inside Passage from Alaska's premier producers, Sky River Films. To order any of these videos or to receive a free brochure of all our programs, call toll-free 1-800-248-WILD or write to Sky River Films, 3710 Woodland Drive, Suite 2100, Anchorage, Alaska, 99517. And now for our feature presentation. Alaska. It's been called the Great Land, the Last Frontier, the Land of the Midnight Sun. Names that describe a place where nature's creativity is displayed in magnificent, unforgettable ways. So much of what comes to mind when we hear the word Alaska comes attached to a vision of the land. This is a vast and spacious country, and from the earliest nomads who crossed an Arctic land bridge thousands of years ago through today's modern northern travelers, it's the spell of the land that captures the imagination and irresistibly draws us here. From the tip of the southeast panhandle to the frozen Arctic tundra, from the heartland of Alaska's sweeping interior to its stormy western coast and the Aleutians, there are many places in Alaska that few travelers ever see. We're about to visit some of these unusual and faraway places. We're about to take a voyage of discovery across the breathtaking wilds of Alaska. It's often been said that there are many Alaskas, and it's easy to see why. The sheer immensity of this place, stretching nearly 2,500 miles from east to west and 1,500 miles north to south, crosses such varied landforms and distinctive topography that no single categorization outside the word Alaska is sufficient to embrace them all. Diversity is at the very heart of the Alaskan experience. Here in Alaska, nature plays on a grand scale, over and over again. Any meaningful list of the longest, the tallest, the coldest, or the farthest would include Alaskan references. And Alaskan descriptions beginning with the most pop up everywhere. For instance, Alaska has more coastline than the entire lower 48 states combined. It's estimated that there are more than 100,000 glaciers in Alaska, ranging from tiny cirque glaciers to huge ice fields that fill entire valleys. There are more than 3,000 rivers in Alaska, and the Yukon River is the fourth longest in North America. Of the 20 highest mountains in the United States, 17 are in Alaska. And Mount McKinley, or Denali, as Alaskan natives first named it, is the highest mountain on the continent. Alaska is home to the largest concentration of bald eagles in the world. In fact, there are over 430 bird species in Alaska. Millions nest here each year. Such a list of natural superlatives could go on for some time. Alaskans often divide the state into 6 broad regions, each with unique elements of geography, wildlife, lifestyle, and history. These regions are known as the Arctic, the Western and Southwestern regions of Alaska, the Interior, South Central, and Southeast Alaska. Our tour of this distant part of the world begins in Southeast Alaska, a place truly blessed by nature's generous bounty. Everywhere you turn in Southeast, you find wonders for the imagination and delights for the eye. Although Alaska is notorious for long winters filled with ice and snow, Southeast Alaska, or the Panhandle as it's often called, experiences far more rain each year than snow. Water is everywhere. Southeast Alaskans travel on the water, work on the water, and of course, play on the water. Needless to say, rain falls abundantly from the southeast sky, in some places to a depth of more than 300 inches per year, which is 25 feet. Water surrounds or connects virtually every southeast town, and these silvery gray passages and byways have been used as a marine highway for thousands of years. Many first-time visitors coming to Alaska begin their travels on these ancient waterways as well. Cruising north through Alaska's Inside Passage is a beautiful way to visit Southeast. Hundreds of wilderness islands dot these waterways. Hundreds more bays, coves, and inlets offer the marine highway traveler venues and vistas unavailable anywhere else in the state. Almost every town and village in Southeast Alaska began for one of 3 reasons. It either has historical ties to a native settlement, Alaska's Russian colonization, or a gold rush. The history of Southeast is filled with stories of dramatic conquests and adventures. Many peoples have plied these waters. If these strange stones, carved by some unknown storyteller thousands of years ago, could talk, what fascinating tales of ancient ways of life they might reveal. What long-lost histories of fate and fortune they may have witnessed. Thousands of years ago, the first inhabitants came to this coast. They became the Haida, great carvers, and the Tsimshian, known as the people of many riches. But it was the Tlinkits who dominated the coast. They lived much like their neighbors, the Kwakiutls to the south. They forged remarkable civilizations. All lived by the bounty of the sea. The people were rich, but the sea was richer. For countless generations, the cycle remained unbroken. Each year, the salmon returned to the rivers. The annual harvests of whales, seals, and sea lions, even the shellfish found in shallow pools along the beaches, added to the richness of life. But suddenly, a change swept over their world. In the 1700s, the riches of the sea brought a different kind of people to these shores. People who would change their lives forever. Russian adventurers, with their recently enslaved Aleut hunters, came for the sea otter. Its luxurious pelt was so highly prized in the markets of the Orient that the fur became known as soft gold. Soon more ships set sail from England and the American colonies, looking for wealth and adventure. Unchecked harvesting eventually wiped out the sea otter trade, and dangerous problems at home led the Russian Tsar to believe his colony in America was no longer worth the trouble and expense it required. An agreement was struck. The United States purchased Russia's interests in Alaska in 1867 for $7.2 million. Many felt the purchase was a disaster. There wasn't much American colonization in Southeast Alaska until the 1880s, when merchants discovered the commercial value of Alaska's abundance of fish. Ships steered a course that kept them between the mainland and the string of seaward islands that tempered the winds and currents of the mighty Pacific. The 98ers, the gold rushers on their way to the Klondike, would give it the name we know today. They called it the Inside Passage. Though Ketchikan is not Alaska's most southern community, it is considered Alaska's gateway city, since it's the first stop on the Inside Passage for travelers coming north from Seattle and British Columbia. Like many southeast towns, the wealth of Ketchikan once came almost exclusively from the sea. Today, Ketchikan depends on other industries as well, including timber and, of course, tourism. In the downtown area, the remnants of an earlier Ketchikan's wild heritage are still around. On historic Creek Street, old frontier structures still stand, elevated on high pilings to keep them well above the tide line. Creek Street used to be lined with brothels or sporting houses, as they were colorfully known. Although they've been closed for decades, some Ketchikan residents still comment on the lusty heritage of this street, saying both the salmon and the fishermen came up the creek to spawn. Throughout Alaska, small float planes are just as important as personal automobiles. In Southeast, they're used in all walks of life, for hauling freight supplies, and commuters to nearby villages, for taking anglers from around the world out to some of the finest sport fishing they'll ever have, and of course for recreation and flight-seeing excursions over some of the most breathtaking landscapes on Earth. Travelers continuing north on the Inside Passage often stop in Petersburg. Known as Alaska's Little Norway, this picturesque community was founded in 1897. Here, hardy men and women board their fishing smacks and trawlers and head out into the Pacific Ocean waters after halibut, salmon, and crab. Petersburg shrimp is another major catch and a famous delicacy in fine restaurants worlds away from Petersburg's icy bays. The remnants of Alaska as a Russian colony still remain in historic Sitka. In the center of town stands St. Michael's Cathedral, an exact rebuilding of the original Russian Orthodox Church from Sitka's earliest days. That church was destroyed by fire in 1966. Luckily, most of the priceless treasures housed inside were saved. Sitka was the Russian capital of Alaska when the Tsar sold it to America in 1867. Earlier Russian governors held elegant parties and rich receptions in the stately mansion on Castle Hill. For a time, some even called Sitka the Paris of the West. Original artifacts of the Russian-American period are also preserved in Sitka's historic Bishop's House. Next to the governor's mansion, this was the most important center of power in the Russian New World. In 1802, Sitka was the site of a great battle between early Russian settlers and angry Tlingit warriors. Nearly 300 colonists were killed by the fierce Kalash, the name the Russians gave the Tlingits. The few who survived retreated to Kodiak, seeking refuge and protection. Governor Alexander Baranov was furious. He vowed not to lose this foothold in the New World. Returning 2 years later with warships, he was intent on destroying the native village near where Sitka now stands. The battle raged for days, but in the end, the Russian cannon made the difference. Next up is Juneau, Alaska's state capital. Juneau was founded as a gold mining town in the 1880s. The discovery that led to its beginning was made by two miners with notorious and unsavory reputations, Joe Juneau and Richard Harris. After finding gold traces in a nearby stream, a local Tlingit chief, Chief Cowie, told him he knew where much more yellow rock could be found. He took them to a fabulous find on what became named, appropriately enough, Gold Creek. But the greatest veins of gold lie encased in hard rock, deep inside the earth. To get at it, a huge mining industry sprang to life, one remnant of which is still visible on the mountainside overlooking the city. This was the Alaska Juneau, or AJ Mine. Across the Gastineau Channel, facing Juneau, lies a companion gold-struck city, Douglas, home for the decaying remains of the Treadwell mine. At one time, Douglas was one of the largest cities in Alaska, and the Treadwell, the largest gold mine in the world. Scattered along the route of the Inside Passage are many smaller towns and communities. Here, life moves at a much slower pace than in the cities. Angoon is a beautiful village located on the western side of Admiralty Island. Tinakee Springs lies just across the Chatham Strait from Angoon. Tinakee is famous in the southeast for its natural hot springs. Kupernoff is another nearby community. Here, a few dozen people live year-round on a group of small islands, several of which are personally owned. Sometimes the remoteness can be difficult, but in trade for the fewness of people comes living a life surrounded by majestic cedar and spruce forests, intricate coves and inlets, and almost daily encounters with Alaska's magnificent wildlife. The wildlife of Alaska is truly magnificent. Travelers are frequently amazed by the abundance and diversity of wild creatures they find so easily throughout Southeast. With little effort, visitors can arrange for excursions that take them into bear country, where black and brown bears spend their summers fattening themselves on returning river salmon. The largest concentrations of bald eagles in the world live in Southeast. They're often seen soaring over the waters in search of food and nested in high trees where their young are well protected from the dangers of other predators. These majestic birds sometimes reach a wingspan of more than 7 feet. Along the shorelines, sandpipers feed and nest. Thousands can suddenly rise in an instant, darting here and there in intricate patterns of precision flight. Snow geese, cranes, and oyster catchers are also often seen. But these are only a few of the hundreds of bird species that can be found. Seals and sea lions sun themselves on rock haulouts or drifting pieces of glacial ice. And of course, Southeast is famous for its gatherings of humpback, gray, and orca whales. Whale watching is a popular activity for residents and visitors alike. Pods of these great creatures feed in the rich waters of Southeast throughout the summer and early fall. The grand spectacle of a breaching humpback whale is always a magnificent and thrilling sight. Until the late 1890s, most Americans laughingly called Alaska Seward's Icebox or Wall Russia. It was just a frozen outpost, a useless northern territory filled with frightful natives and a few white adventurers. But in the winter of 1897, when the steamships Excelsior and Portland landed in Seattle and San Francisco, men loaded with gold came down the gangplanks and began telling fabulous tales of a strike in the Yukon Territory on a tributary of the Klondike River. Instantly, America and the rest of the world went mad for Klondike gold. A fever, unknown since the California gold rush 50 years earlier, drew men and more than a few women north to Seattle. Over 100,000 boarded any ship available and headed up the Inside Passage to what surely would be their fortune. This was the opportunity of a lifetime, and Alaska drew stampeders like a magnet drawing iron. Gold Rush fever built the town of Skagway. And as part of a National Historic Park, over 100 buildings remain the same as they were back at the turn of the century. Gold seekers of the Klondike disembarked here and in nearby Dyea and made their way over the famous Chilkoot and White Pass trails. Skagway was run by a gang of cutthroats, ruled by a ruthless bully named Soapy Smith. Soapy, a con man without peer, robbed and looted openly in those lawless days. Then on July 4th, 1898, he had a gunfight with local vigilante Frank Reed. The two men faced each other on the old Skagway dock and shot it out. Both went down, and gravestones say they're buried in Skagway's local cemetery. While in Skagway, one colorful attraction is the White Pass and Yukon Railroad. Constructed through perilous terrain, most thought impossible to cover. But with the lure of riches from the Klondike before them, the engineers and workers succeeded. Their remarkable achievement still stands, taking modern travelers into the Yukon over an unforgettable mountain route. Our final images of Southeast are those of one of the most popular tourist spots in Alaska, Glacier Bay. This is an idyllic jewel in nature's grand design, carved on for over 4 million years by the relentless movement of massive fields of ice. What we can visit today is a magnificent place, filled with glaciers, wildlife, and stunning open vistas. Glacier Bay itself is barely 200 years old. After eons of moving forward, the glacier started to retreat. So far, it has left a 65-mile-long Y-shaped bay, but it's moving rather quickly. The bay is already 20 miles longer than when the famous naturalist John Muir visited here in 1879. The most populated area of Alaska is called South Central, a loosely defined region stretching out around Anchorage, the largest city in the state. Over half the population of Alaska lives in South Central, around 300,000 people. And it's South Central's unusual mix of cultures and lifestyles, occupations and leisures that we're about to explore. Although it's just far enough north to be left out of most conversations about South Central Alaska, the famous bush pilot town of Talkeetna, a major staging area for mountaineers climbing the highest peaks in North America, is where our South Central journey begins. Looking north across the Susitna River, travelers to Talkeetna often catch their first sight of the highest mountain on the continent, Mount McKinley, or Denali, the Great One, as the natives originally named it. Here, the legendary lifestyle of the Alaskan bush pilot is still alive. Whether taking groceries into remote villages and mining camps, or transporting mountain climbers to bases high on the side of Mount McKinley, the intrepid bush pilots of Talkeetna, both men and women, often fly in weather conditions many people have trouble driving in. These aren't reckless hotshots of the skies, but rather a very specialized group of highly skilled pilots who spend so much time in the seat of a single-engine airplane that they can land in places where airstrips aren't even built. About 40 miles south of Talkeetna begins the Matanuska-Susitna Valley. Here again are places where history was made by the search for gold. The Independence Mine in Hatcher Pass is just outside of Palmer, Alaska. It was one of the largest gold finds in Alaskan history. Not far from Independence Mine, as the raven flies, is the Matanuska Glacier. This spectacular inland field of ice flows out of the Chugach Mountains. Its melting face gives rise to the turbulent, silt-laden waters of the Matanuska River, which flows through the heart of Alaska's most productive agricultural region. The Susitna River and its tributaries provide some of the best sport fishing in South Central Alaska. 15-pound silver salmon and king salmon, often topping 60 pounds, return each year to their spawning places. The vast river network of this region also provides recreation for whitewater rafters and kayakers. While Alaska's native heritage goes back for thousands of years, in terms of the westernization or Americanization of Alaska, its history is still very young. Only within the past century have most South Central communities been born, and the towns of the Matanuska Valley are even younger still. Lying 40 miles northeast of Anchorage, Palmer was established as an agricultural colony during America's Great Depression of the 1930s. The original settlers were men and women from the lower 48 who were offered land in Alaska as a hopeful escape from the poverty of rural life down south. It was a rugged place, but hopes ran high, and for many of them there was no choice. Some of the original town site is still here, but by and large the colony was not a success. One annual event that grew out of the valley's agricultural heritage is the Alaska State Fair, held at the end of August each year. In addition to rides and carnival attractions, the fair also features the world's largest vegetables. For example, cabbages have weighed in at more than 80 pounds. Like southeast Alaska, temperatures in South Central are warmer than most visitors expect. Winters here are filled with snow, but during the summer there are days when the temperature soars into the 80s. South Central winters really aren't too cold either, unless you compare them with Hawaii or Florida. In fact, during the coldest month of the year, January, South Central has an average temperature of 13 degrees. This makes winter warmer on average than Bismarck, Duluth, or Minneapolis. The business and residential heart of South Central Alaska is Anchorage, which is also the largest city in the state. Like the towns in the Matanuska Valley, Anchorage was founded less than a century ago. The first town site started in 1916 around Ship Creek as, naturally, an anchorage for ships. Originally just a tent city in the wilderness, Anchorage was a midpoint in a multi-million-dollar effort to link the existing railroad lines coming out of Seward in the south with the towns of Nenana and Fairbanks to the north. President Warren G. Harding drove the Golden Spike that completed the railway in 1923. Although Anchorage started out as nothing more than a railroad camp, its population soon began to expand. During the Second World War, nearby military bases were built as a part of the American defense strategy for the Pacific. With the oil boom of the 70s, Anchorage experienced another major time of expansion. Today, it's a typical urban city with a little over 225,000 citizens. The date was March 27th, 1964, the Friday before Easter. It was a beautiful spring day, but the calm pace of the warm Good Friday afternoon was about to be shattered. For deep inside the Earth's crust, incredible forces were straining. Powerful, violent, terrifying tensions, long in the making, were about to let go. The Gulf Coast of Alaska was hit by the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in the history of North America. For hundreds of miles, the earth twisted and opened. Buildings collapsed. Pavement heaved and cracked into pieces. The tremors were felt from here to Antarctica. When the shocks were over, 115 people had died. Alaska was declared an emergency area. But massive federal help allowed Alaskans to rebuild. One small part of a devastated neighborhood in Anchorage was set aside and named Earthquake Park. It still remains today as a jumbled reminder of the overwhelming forces nature unleashed that day. Like many other cosmopolitan communities, Anchorage has an opera, a symphony, and several theater companies. There are over 200 restaurants and clubs, and the nightlife in Anchorage offers entertainment to suit almost any taste or style. Still being quite young, Anchorage has a somewhat mixed personality as a city. As Alaskans say, we do things a bit different up here. Indeed, such differences aren't hard to find. From running dog sled races through the middle of downtown to its somewhat unique mixture of rustic and modern architecture, Anchorage has a little bit of everything that people come north to find. Even in a city the size of Anchorage, what folks call the real Alaska is only moments away. If wildlife is part of what it takes to be in the real Alaska, well, it starts right at the edge of the city, at a place called Potter Marsh. South Central river fishing is famous among anglers worldwide, but not all of it takes place in remote, unpopulated areas. Near the confluence of the Kenai and Russian rivers, during the sockeye and red salmon runs, the competition for the best fishing spot gets so intense, Alaskans have termed it combat fishing. Amazingly enough, considering everyone who can lift a pole is standing shoulder to shoulder to shoulder along the banks of the river, the big ones do come through. There really is a place at the proverbial end of the road. It's the town of Homer. Homer is as far west as you can drive in Alaska on a road that's still connected with the lower 48 states. A famous landmark of Homer is the Spit, an 8-mile stretch of sand reaching out into the crystal waters of Kachemak Bay. Hundreds of charter boats leave the Spit each day, taking enthusiastic sport fishermen out after halibut, salmon, lingcod, and other delicacies. Many wilderness resorts stage their activities out of Homer. Tucked away in the inlets and estuaries around Kachemak Bay are first-class hunting, fishing, and wilderness lodges, which cater to the traveler who really wants to leave city life behind. Long ago, great rivers created a broad lowland between the Alaska Range on the south and the Brooks Range on the north. This is the region Alaskans call the interior. Immense forests of aspen, birch, and spruce cover much of the interior's landscape. In the far northern and western reaches, trees give way to tundra. Compared to the natural abundance found in the southeast, the interior is not nearly so bountiful. Here, it has always been more difficult to survive. Winters in this place are cold, but the people of the interior, the Athabascans, knew how to survive on this land. They were always on the move, searching for beaver, bear, and muskrat, following the pathways of the caribou and seasonal migrating birds. Their tools and knives were carved from the antlers and bones of the animals they killed. Skins became covers for their homes. Quills and feathers were used as decoration on beautifully made clothing. Nothing was wasted. Every gift from the land was appreciated. From the earliest run of the salmon each spring until returning geese cried out overhead, the people traveled from camp to camp. When the moose shed their antlers, it was time to move to new hunting grounds in the south. Quietly, they would travel over the tundra and into the forests. In several ways, survival in Alaska's rural areas, what Alaskans call the bush, is still dependent on a close understanding of the land and the ability to manage and harvest its resources. For most Native Alaskans living in the bush, subsistence hunting and fishing are part of a basic way of life that stretches back thousands of years, and also a way to reduce their dependence on cash in villages where wage-earning jobs are scarce and often seasonal. Respect for the land is still taught by the elders. Skills quite foreign to anyone growing up in the city must become second nature to those who live here. The seasons still control the rhythm of life. Summer is the time for fish camp. It seems hard to believe this endless flow of food will pass so quickly. But in just a few weeks, the salmon will be gone. Now is the time for laying up stores that will be vital during the long winter ahead. There are other timetables to understand as well. Each animal has its prime season. Every flower and berry its time of usefulness and readiness. The great animals, the moose, bear, and caribou, follow their ancient patterns of foraging across the wilds. The wolf, cunning and quiet, watches for an opportunity to feast as well. And birds, millions migrate across the skies. This land is always in motion, even when it appears quiet and still. Once the vision of the viewer is trained, life, even in these remote spots, becomes obvious, abundant, and active. For people living in the interior, Fairbanks is the heart of the heartland of Alaska. The second largest city in the state, Fairbanks has a population of nearly 30,000 people, with about 77,000 living within the greater Fairbanks area. The notorious weather extremes of Alaska are certainly evident in Fairbanks. The summers are often very beautiful, filled with clear skies, daylight lasting nearly the whole night long, and 80 to 90 degree temperatures. Here, the summers may be short, but Fairbanksans go all out to make the most of every sunny moment. Fairbanks is home to the charter campus of the University of Alaska, originally begun as an agricultural and mining school back in 1918. The campus library has one of the finest Alaska collections, and a superb museum is also on the grounds. There's a geophysical research center, renowned worldwide for its northern studies in biology, fisheries, physics, and other natural sciences. One highlight of any summer adventure in Fairbanks should be a trip on one of the riverboats named Discovery. These authentic sternwheelers, Discovery 1 and 2, take travelers into the historic backcountry of the interior, down the Chena and Tanana rivers, with stops that include a visit to a recreation of a traditional native village. Of course, Alaska's temperatures are most notorious at the other end of the thermometer. Winters in Fairbanks are relatively long and get very cold. 40 or 50 degrees below zero is not uncommon during midwinter. And while the summer sun was out for 22 hours in late June, December's dim light hangs around for only 3.5 hours. It's easy to see how winter depression or cabin fever can set in. There is one important benefit from the long, dark winter nights of the interior. They allow more opportunities to behold those magnificent rivers of light. The northern lights that rush across the Alaskan sky. The aurora borealis dances like fire high above the surface of the earth. The lights surge and sweep, shimmering in spectacular colors. Often their bright shafts and folding layers extend hundreds of miles into space, creating a mysterious and awe-inspiring display. Towering higher than any other spot in North America, Mount McKinley, or Denali, the Great One, as ancient Alaskans first named it, is a broad, majestic mountain. It soars to over 20,000 feet, so tall that it literally creates its own weather patterns across the summit. Here is another example of the overwhelming scale and the intense beauty that nature displays across this land. The challenge of climbing Denali is an irresistible draw for mountaineers from around the world. Every summer, many U.S. and international teams fly into the lower elevations of the mountain, intent on conquering her lofty peaks. Although some ascent routes are much easier than others, this is a mountain never to be taken for granted. More than 75 climbers have died on these rugged slopes, often as a result of rapidly changing weather conditions that lock them for days or even weeks in blinding snowstorms and unexpectedly severe winds. A few heroic rescues have saved some lives, but even the remarkable bush pilots who work these climbs year after year are powerless to help when Denali's fury truly lets go. Denali National Park and Preserve surround this magnificent mountain. The park is open to visitors year-round, although most accommodations are only available from early spring until late fall. Inside the park, there are many miles of scenic roadways and well-maintained hiking trails. But in an effort to reduce the impact increasing numbers of visitors are having on the wildlife, more than 100 miles of gravel road in the most important animal viewing areas can only be accessed by the Park Service and tour company buses. Yet even group transportation is worth the inconvenience when it makes it possible for travelers to see caribou, bear, sheep, and moose that would not remain in these places if automobiles were allowed unrestricted access. The Arctic. This vast region of Alaska, stretching 600 miles west to east across the very top of the continent, probably typifies what many people think all of Alaska is like. Strong winds, cold temperatures, and long, dark winters characterize the climate of the Arctic. At midwinter, the sun disappears below the horizon for 67 days. Although there is snow on the ground for more than 9 months out of the year, the general moisture level is like a desert. only a cold one, not hot. Many areas of the Arctic have only 4 or 5 inches of precipitation annually. In spite of the obvious harshness of the climate, the ecosystem below the snow is amazingly fragile. The treeless tundra supports mosses and lichens. Delicate summer flowers hug the surface as well. Vast herds of caribou, numbering in the thousands, migrate across the open Arctic plain. Foxes, wolves, and even some brown bear roam the region. But the largest monarch of the Arctic is the polar bear. Sometimes weighing 1,500 pounds and reaching 10 feet or more in length. Of all Alaskan bears, the polar bear is probably the most dangerous because they seldom have contact with man and therefore are generally not frightened by human presence. America's most northern community is the town of Barrow, the trade and political center for most of the Arctic coast. This Inupiat Eskimo village of about 3,200 people lies on the shores of the Arctic Ocean between the Chukchi and Beaufort Seas. The economy of Barrow, like the economy of most of the rest of Alaska, is based on the immense oil discoveries made 180 miles to the east, offshore in the Beaufort Sea, and on land at Prudhoe Bay. Here, at the top of the world, lies the largest oil field in North America, Prudhoe Bay. Developing this field and getting the oil to market was an extraordinary engineering accomplishment. After all, this is a place where the wind chill factor can drop temperatures to more than 100 degrees below zero. Here, frozen steel can become as brittle as glass. To move the oil south, an 800-mile pipeline was built from Prudhoe Bay to Valdez at a cost of over $8 billion. Almost half of the 48-inch diameter pipe is buried underground in areas where stable rock and soils allow. The remainder travels above ground, resting on special supports which let the pipeline flex and also keep the warm crude oil from melting the permanently frozen soil. On its route to the south, the Trans-Alaska Pipeline crosses more than 800 streams and rivers, including the mighty Yukon. It also traverses 3 mountain ranges. Since it began to flow in 1977, Prudhoe Bay oil has brought much prosperity to Alaska. But oil is not a renewable resource. Like the busts following the boom times of its gold rush past, many fear Alaska will struggle again after the oil runs out. Southwest of Barrow, on the Chukchi Sea, is the native community of Kotzebue. Situated 35 miles north of the Arctic Circle, Kotzebue is another regional center for outlying villages and towns. Kotzebue is a popular travel destination and is serviced by jet from Anchorage 3 times a day. Local attractions include traditional Eskimo dances and a blanket toss. Kotzebue hosts a midsummer trade fair and festival that attracts villagers from many outlying communities. Highlights of the event include sharing traditional native foods like whale, seal, and walrus, and sporting competitions that derive from ancient hunting skills passed on from generation to generation. "150 miles down the coast from Kotzebue, on the southern side of the Arctic Circle, is one of Alaska's most famous towns. Here, we leave the Arctic and enter the western Bering Sea region of the state. Our destination is Nome. Nome is another great gold rush town, made famous by the Anvil Creek discovery of 1898. The largest gold nugget ever found in Alaska was discovered near Nome in 1903. It weighed 155 ounces, was 7 inches long, 4 inches wide, and 2 inches thick. At the turn of the century, it seemed gold was everywhere, in the creeks, even on the beach. Although it wasn't the last or even the richest strike in Alaska, finding such wealth in the sand meant just about anyone might strike it rich. 30,000 desperate gold seekers rushed north. A different race for gold still brings hardy men and women to Nome today. But these modern-day adventurers are part of a race for glory more than for riches. Nome is the finish line for a grueling 1,049-mile sled dog race, the Iditarod Trail Sled Dog Race, that pits world-class teams against one another and the frozen Alaska wilderness. Each year in March, mushers and their teams face deep snows, bone-chilling temperatures, and unpredictable trail conditions that can sap their energy and make even the smallest tasks difficult. Beginning in Anchorage, they race across Alaska, on frozen rivers, over mountains, and along the icy shores of the Bering Sea. It's easy to understand why this sled dog competition is billed as the last great race on Earth. Further south, along the rivers and coastal inlets of western Alaska, lie dozens of small Inupiat and Yupik Eskimo communities. Unalakleet, Stebbins, Alakanuk, Tununuk, and many other remote villages out here share a common lifestyle, a mixture of the modern and the ancient. Here again, a mostly subsistence lifestyle sustains the people. Their relationship with the land and its animals is a close one. Their understanding of nature's cycles and seasons, how to read the signs of the ever-changing weather, how to protect oneself when hunting alone, how to be prepared to meet the unexpected challenges that are a part of everyday life. These and other skills must become instinctive if one is to succeed and survive. The commercial hub of the southern parts of western Alaska centers around Bethel, which is also the largest community in the region. Bethel is near the end of the immense Kuskokwim River, a transportation corridor that stretches deep into the Alaskan interior. Many parts of this vast river delta are subject to seasonal flooding. Summer temperatures range from the 30s to the low 60s, although wind chill can lower those temperatures considerably. Straddling the traditional demarcation between Alaska's western and Aleutian regions lie two fascinating attractions. One is the incredible viewing area for brown bears available at McNeil River. The other is where the second most powerful volcanic eruption in history took place. On June 6, 1912, several cubic miles of ash ejected from Novarupta volcano near Mount Katmai. There were so many fumes coming from the ground when scientists first arrived to explore that the site became known as the Valley of 10,000 Smokes. As we bridge from Alaska's western coast into our final region of the state, the Aleutians, a brief look at the rich waters of Bristol Bay will add another dimension to our understanding of Alaska's great diversity. The fishing villages of Dillingham, King Salmon, and Egegik are all typical of the Bristol Bay region. These are some of the richest fishing waters in the world, and home to the largest sockeye salmon runs found anywhere. The incredible fish runs of the King Salmon River area support several superb wilderness lodges. Visitors to these remote sites are not headed to your typical fish camp. Accessible by boat or more conveniently by small float plane, this is a sportsman's paradise, where satisfaction is sometimes literally guaranteed. For 1,000 miles, a rocky chain of islands sweeps out into stormy waters of the Pacific. These are the Aleutians, created millions of years ago by fiery eruptions deep beneath the waves. They are home for a people who were masters of the sea. The Aleuts use their boats, the Bidarka and the Umiak, to hunt everything from salmon to sea lion to whale. Dressed in a parka made skillfully by his wife, the hunter was completely waterproof. He could roll in the waves like a playful sea otter, harvesting an ocean that teemed with life. When Russian explorers reached these islands in the 1740s, Aleut life changed forever. Ruthless fur hunters from Siberia, the Promišljeniki, were quick with their muskets. Island by island, they slaughtered the sea otter, and the Aleuts as well. In the first 2 generations after Russian contact, the Aleut population dropped from 20,000 to 2,000. Today's Aleutian Islands are still surrounded by rich waters, but rather than sea otters, modern harvests consist of salmon, bottomfish, and crab. The Pribilof Islands, just north of the Aleutians, are the summer feeding grounds for thousands of seals and sea lions. They are likewise a major breeding area for horned and tufted puffins. These chunky characters often nest in the rocks and crevices along the sheer cliffs that overlook the sea. Dutch Harbor on the island of Unalaska is the richest port in America for landed seafood catches. Over the past 2 decades, this distant outpost has been growing even larger. It has become a welcome port for international fishing and commercial shipping fleets that ply the often dangerous waters of the North Pacific and the Bering Sea. Our final stop on this grand and sweeping adventure is Kodiak Island. Called Alaska's Emerald Isle, at 3,588 square miles, it's the largest island in the state. Kodiak's legendary natural beauty and wealth have drawn travelers and fortune seekers to its shores for hundreds of years. Reminders that Kodiak was the first capital of Russian America are easily found today. The Holy Resurrection Orthodox Church dates back to 1794 and is the oldest Christian parish in Alaska. The Erskine House is home of the Baranov Museum and is filled with a rich collection of artifacts from the early Russian period. Kodiak is brushed by warm Japanese ocean currents that cross the Pacific. They bring a wealth of sea life to these shores and frequent rains that give the island its lush green cover. Kodiak is a rugged island of unspoiled beauty, a place where modern stories of Alaska are being written against the backdrop of a unique and colorful past. Wherever travelers journey across this remarkable land, residents often say hello by welcoming them to the real Alaska. Whether in Southeast, South Central, the Arctic, the interior, the West, or the Aleutians, each feels their part of the great land somehow holds the essence of what Alaska is really all about. The immensity of this place and the diversity such size allows makes this understandable. For within its forest, and along its streams and bays, deep into its mountain ranges, over tundra and glaciers and fields, Alaska lays out, in infinite ways, a beauty that touches each soul. This is the Great Land, the last frontier. And once you've touched Alaska, there's part of you she never lets go.